The second is like it. I don't know about you, but I join with the scholar of the law in the gospel today. I would have been just fine if Jesus would have just stopped with the first greatest commandment. How about you? Isn't one enough? Isn't one difficult enough? Isn't one satisfactory enough? After all, shouldn't the love of God take care of everything? Why did we have to go on? Why was there a need for a second? And not just a second, but notice how Jesus says, the second is like it. What is the it? Well, the first. So isn't it amazing that Jesus takes this second greatest commandment and he elevates it. He makes it equal to it. He makes it incredibly important. You shall love the Lord your God with all your mind, heart, soul, and strength. You shall then love your neighbor as yourself. One would have been sufficient. Thank you, Lord. But here we are. Jesus would not be satisfied with just a simple greatest commandment. No, he feels the need to go on because, of course, he needs you and I to understand that really, truth be told, in order for us to be all in, and keep in mind, that's what Jesus and that's what the Torah commands of you and I, that we're all in. There's no part-time business here. No. Jesus makes it clear that we love God with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our soul, with all of our strength, with our entire being. So because of that, Jesus wants to be able to recognize the need that in order for us to truly be all in, well then the best way that we can love the Lord our God is, of course, to love our neighbor. You remember last Sunday, don't you? Probably not. I don't even remember what I had for lunch today. How can we remember what happened last Sunday? If you remember last Sunday, the invitation was ours to begin to discover that, of course, we had that beloved coin of Caesar. Now you remember? Now things are coming back to you. And we talked about where do we find the image of God? I asked that question of each of us who gathered in this church a week ago. Where do we find the image of God? If we have to give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, we need to give to God what belongs to God. Where do we find the image of God? Well, we find the image of God within each of us. So, it makes sense, doesn't it? That Jesus couldn't just stop at one. You know, it's like the Lay's potato chips. You can't just stop with one. You have to go on, and you have to take more, you have to eat more, you have to elevate more, because, of course, the truth be told, if we're really going to love God, well, the best way we do it is to recognize that God is found first and foremost in our neighbor, in the stranger, in the immigrant, in the friend, in the spouse, in the teacher, in the couple that we meet here at church, and hopefully tomorrow as we gather as a people in this community with our Lutheran brothers and sisters, with people of other faith traditions, we begin to see and to recognize God in them, and because of that, the only way we can be all in, the only way we can love God with our entire being, mind, soul, and strength, is we have to recognize the two are inseparable. We have to be able to love our neighbor as well. Because when we do that, then the first and the greatest commandment is fulfilled. Fulfilled in our hearing, fulfilled in our doing. Honey, why are you doing all this for me anyway? It was a question asked of an elderly woman who had had a stroke, and her adult daughter was caring for her in her home. It was a question that came out of an argument between the two of them over a hard-boiled egg. The daughter, who had been giving her entire being to her mother, who had had the stroke, who was attentive to her care, trying to get her strength back so that she could once again return to her own home and be independent, which the mother desperately wanted and the daughter wanted as well. And in the midst of the argument over, honey, why are you doing this for me anyways? The daughter gave her a whole litany of reasons. Because I want you to be independent, because I want you to have your strength back, because I want you to be able to go home, because. And she went on, and she went on, and she went on. And finally the mother looked at her and she said, honey, that is all junk. That didn't sit well with the daughter. The old blood pressure went up just a little bit more. But then the mother looked at her daughter and said, the reason, honey, I said that's all junk is because, isn't it because you love me? And I love you from the depths of our being? Isn't that why you're doing this? And the daughter looked at her mother, and the daughter said, I felt like a little kid again, being taught by my mother the lessons that are truly important. Because oftentimes when we get caught up in having to do something because it's a commandment, we get caught up in the doing. And we forget why we do it. And the reason why Jesus wants us to love God and wants us to be all in with everything that we have and all that we are, the reason why he wants us to love neighbor as ourselves is, yes, because it is a commandment, but more and far more important is this. Because we truly love one another. And the reason why that is so is because we recognize ourselves in the other. And what do we recognize? We recognize God.